Today on Faces of Florence, Greg.stuckey. Being a missionary, bringing hope, love, and the gospel to the ends of the earth is difficult work. Greg visits our studio to tell us about an exciting and challenging new chapter in his life.
Hey, welcome. We're so glad you found us. Radio Free is a 24-hour Christian mixed radio station broadcasting right here out of Florence, South Carolina. So when you're driving around town, remember to tune it in to 92.5. And if you're outside of the Florence area, you can listen 24 hours a day at radiofree.cc.
Greg.stuckey, welcome to Faces of Florence. For the second time.
Take dos. Yes. Yes.
Just full disclosure, when I first started getting the Faces of Florence thing going, Greg agreed to be my first guest and turned out to be a guinea pig as well. And
what's new?
And we had
my life as a guinea pig.
Yeah,
okay,
right,
it's all right.
But I appreciate that you're very gracious. And I actually take it as God's provision because a lot has happened between then and now, and
True.
I'm excited to kind of get caught up on what's been going on with you guys. So
Certainly.
I usually start these interviews with just kind of the basics. A lot of people know who you are. You're well known in Florence, well loved. But if you could, for those who don't know you, just kind of give us the basics. Where were you born and raised? How you got to Florence? That kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised, Greg.stuckey, born and raised in the little community of Stuckey, South Carolina, over by Hemingway. Grew up there, went to school there, finished up college at Francis Marion University here in Florence.
Yeah.
And was heading toward seminary. That got sidetracked for about 20 years. That's another interview.
Yeah, okay.
Altogether.
We'll come back to that, right?
I eventually did go to grad school and seminary, later, other story. And out of college, went to work with the YMCA of Florence.
That's where I first met you.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Began work there in a program called Activity Therapy with severely emotionally disturbed youth. And when you're with the Y, you're also in charge of or working in 15 other programs at the same time as a program director. But I really had an opportunity. I was sidetracked from seminary, but the director there, Barry Watkins, said, we would love to have you here because we want to do ministry here. We want to reach out to youth here at the Y. A lot of people don't remember that's Young Men's Christian Association, and it actually means something here in Florence and in many other places, but it's sort of lost some of that drive over the years. But I had ministry there, and from there I hired my wife to be in a program. That's another story for another time as well. But we left there and then began the youth ministry at Church at Sandhurst. At Church at Sandhurst, I have been both the absolute youngest employee on staff, and I have been the oldest employee on staff.
All right.
Funny how that works at different times. But we left Sandhurst to serve in missions in Belize, Central America with Pioneers Ministry, World Outreach Fellowship. Then we went from there to work with Amazon Focus, other mission organizations, and then back to Sandhurst for the last 12 years as pastor of missions. And we've been in many mission roles and ministry roles throughout the last 30 years, Jamie and I, my bride. And currently we are, all of that to say, we have now begun a new season, kind of along the lines of, it's a new stage in life, and what do you do with 30 years of missions and ministry experience, sort of what now, Lord? Adam Richardson at Sandhurst loves to use the phrase, putting things in your gear bag of life, equipment to use. That's a great term.
Yeah.
And we have had a gear bag stuffed full of experiences and roles and great successes and some moments that have been less than successful, all that equals lots of experience.
Yeah.
And we've asked the Lord in this new season, how do you want to use that? And that closed up really our role with Church at Sandhurst as far as being on staff.
Right.
We have moved into a new season of coaching and mentoring missions and missionaries around the world. While we're available as consultants for churches in the U.S., and we do a good bit of that, and we love doing that, our focus really is in the 3 E's of encouraging, equipping, and exhorting national and indigenous missionaries. And by that, I just mean missionaries in their own context, in their own country, in their own tribe, and within their own ethnicity where they are. So we travel the world doing the equipping in a couple of areas. Jamie, with her interview with you here prior to this, in the area of biblical trauma healing and the arts, fantastic things. Truly a mission and ministry for such a time as this, as we hear, in Scripture, truly. And then I do assist her. I'm trained in those things as well. But oftentimes she is ministering with children and with women in very delicate, difficult places in life, perhaps coming out of human trafficking or the products of abuse, societies of abuse, cultures of abuse around the world. Therefore, the male does not produce a good part of the trusting environment there.
Yes.
But then there are situations where men are involved in trauma healing. And then, of course, in those situations, I am indeed a co-teacher, and I'm there for balance. We have an opportunity coming up with that actually in a couple of weeks in a Central American country with their military. And I can't exactly say which country, though. A lot of people that know us will probably figure that out. Yeah. But their military is having great difficulty with soldiers, men and women soldiers with PTSD, and have been through some tumultuous circumstances. And there have been instances of soldier suicide. Really great impact of trauma on them and on their families and their lives, as trauma tends to emanate and show itself, manifest itself in those ways. And so Jamie has been invited to go in to the bases of this country, to their Army bases, to conduct biblical trauma healing equipping sessions for some of their military leaders and the soldiers involved in this. And the general of the Army of that country, the brigadier general of that country, whenever confronted with the fact that we understand that you want this and desire this, but this material and these teachings are thoroughly biblical. They do combine mental health best practices, but it is thoroughly biblical in principle and not around Scripture, directly with Scripture, where the response of the brigadier general of this army, of this country, said, Jesus front and center, I have no problem with that.
Wow. That's
okay. Now that is just it gives me chills. That's actually just astounding. And then so I will be the little helper fella in some of those sessions and around that country. But that was a very elongated answer to say our two primary areas, Jamie with the trauma healing, and then me with biblical education, equipping missionaries and pastors in their own context that can't get to education training, and they don't have discipleship present to be able to help them in those roles. So that's both in the formal and informal context for me, where there are some places I'll be part of their faculty. Imagine that. That's scary enough right there. But I'll be part of teaching in seminaries and biblical universities in some other countries, equipping leaders and helping them design curriculum and building for that. And then on a very informal basis as well, in some villages and some countries around the world, maybe under a tree in a village or in a hut in a village or in some little hotel meeting room or in a hotel room or a courtyard or whatever, going through biblical teachings and just cramming it in. And those situations are amazing, because in some of those situations, it is like, okay, we're going to be here. We're going to be here for 3 days, and we need you to teach from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. For these 3 days, and then that's it. Because sometimes it's in places that are sensitive, and you can't teach for a longer period of time, or be found out or not appreciated, and so we have to do it that way. But amazingly enough, the leaders that come to those trainings, they're there. They've come in from a long way. They are there. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. makes everyone here quite cringy, and I don't blame them. Under normal circumstances, me as well. But in those places, that's the time to teach. That's the time to learn. They're there. They're not even sleepy. They're taking notes, taking part, getting equipped, in whatever discipline that they ask for. Both Jamie and I we're with Reliant Mission, and also another group called Here's Life, but we only come at their invitation. That's the only basis on which we show up. Only at invitation, to encourage and equip and exhort them to do it. And in seminary, we learn MAWL, M-A-W-L, model, assist, watch, leave. And that's a big part of what we do. That's why whenever we're out in places, now we, as opposed to going in and setting up somewhere for the long term, we work with leaders and ministry organizations and mission organizations and local churches ahead of time. And then when we show up, it's usually for a month or less, maybe a little more, but it depends on the situation. But we're there in that culture, in that context, in that place for a very specified short amount of time. And then we're out of there on to the next place, which does make for an interesting life for us, very much so. But we're in a new season. Both of our girls are up and away and doing very well in life. Very proud of them. But
the nest is empty.
The nest is empty, and to Jamie's consternation, somehow they grew up and they don't need us anymore. Right. Well, we're always mom and dad.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have freedom to be able to go, and that's what this new season is. So that's why it looks different. We really ask people, if they ask what we do, which is very difficult to explain, we just say, let's just turn to Exodus 17. Let's just look at the story of Aaron and Hur in Scripture.
There you go.
With Moses and Israel in battle, Moses up on the hillside. And if you're familiar with that passage, when his arms are raised, then Israel is winning the battle. Yep. When his arms flag and drop down, they're losing the battle. Aaron and Hur go in and sit him down on a rock. One holds up his left arm, one holds up his left arm, and as long as his arms are up, then they're winning the battle, which means Aaron and Hur don't have the best campfire stories at night when the soldiers get together talking about, I took on this battalion, or I did this, and I took down this guy with a horse, and they're like, yep, I had his left arm. Yep, I had his right arm. It doesn't make for great stories, but an incredibly important role. And all that to say, it's really our goal just to hold up leaders' arms.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, Greg, because there's something there that is, I don't want to say unique. That sounds a little cynical, but to be that humble right out of the gate, like that And as followers of Christ, we're all called to be that way, but it's hard, as you know, as humans. And so you are setting yourself up. You're going into battle knowing you're going to be the guy that's holding up the arms, not the guy that's necessarily, killing the battalions and doing all the
right.
And that's we need those guys. And you and Jamie are those people, and it's just fascinating.
I'm not quite sure how to respond to that. We have been in positions in the past and throughout our missions and ministry career of being the leaders.
Yeah.
Okay. In various places, and that is That is a tremendous responsibility and an honor and a privilege to be able to do that. But our joy is not being that. Our joy now is, if we could possibly not even be seen, would be even better, because we really want to hold up the arms of leaders and then nudge them in and then step away. We're still there as coaches, but we don't want any role of leadership and responsibility, because tendencies around the world and right here, as you well know, if any of us step up in front to lead and to run the thing, whatever it may be, people are glad to have you run it.
Yeah.
And as long as, a strong leader steps in and is doing everything, well, then most aren't doing very much. And that's taken some real learning and some real experience, and that took having to see it over and over and over to catch on to that dynamic. Yeah. And while we're tempted, still tempted to say, okay, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it the way that I would do it. You're not doing it. That's not how we've always done it. I'm just step aside and let me do it. That doesn't work, and it really doesn't help much of anybody. A lot of things changed at Sandhurst. Dynamics changed whenever Adam Richardson came in, and being on staff even with developing leaders and volunteers, he would tell us all the time. He would just say, if you find someone and they're doing it 80 to 85% or so as good as you, back off.
They're not going to get that last 10% unless they're on their own.
No, that's true. And I've found out many times that golly day, they don't do it exactly like I did it, and thank the Lord for that, because they're actually better at it than I ever was. Yeah. And they're taking it to new heights and to do things, and that's a joy in ministry. It really, the word for that is discipleship. That is discipleship. Yeah. And sometimes it goes just like you think. Sometimes it doesn't go just like you think. Sometimes it goes better, but it's someone else doing it. And in any case, with any leader anywhere, if it's you doing it, that's okay. But if over the course of your ministry and life, there are 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more people doing it now because of your ministry, then that's 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 times better.
Right.
And that's very, very important. So,
well, let's talk a little bit, Greg, about let's rewind time a little bit back to when you were first out on the mission field. The work you're doing now is training people like young Greg. What did you have, or maybe even what was lacking back then that you're filling now? Now that you've had 30 years of experience and you're going to that young Greg and you're helping him. Back then, what were you lacking? What wisdom? What's the greatest wisdom you have to give young Greg now?
Well, that question would have begun to have known about before I got here. Okay, just kidding. Well,
gotta keep you on your toes, Greg.
Well, yeah. Well, the young version of us is always high on passion and enthusiasm to get the job done. And while that's important, then we really have to learn passion and enthusiasm only get you so far. Yeah. You need to recognize your gifts. You need to recognize your calling. And being called into a ministry is incredibly important. Being equipped for ministry is very, very important. I would just say we were very blessed in our younger years of ministry without all the training in the world that we have now, both formally and informally with credentials and all of that. God was very gracious in keeping us from error, and that's a real blessing. Yeah. I would say listening to mentors. I grew up in a situation, in a difficult home situation, and did not have the leadership that I think any child, any son, any daughter needs. Yeah. But on the other hand, I was so fortunate. I had countless mentors who stepped into my life, and they were phenomenal in teaching me about life and discipling me and challenging me to travel and learning how to study scriptures and to preach. I mean, I'm telling you what, they were there. So one of the things that I offer now is prayerfully being that coach, being that mentor, telling, that's something that I really stress now for everyone in ministry, in missions here and around the world. Listen to your mentors. Look for someone to disciple you. No matter how far you are along in life, you need to be taught. You need to be fed. You need to be discipled. And you and your passion and your enthusiasm is great, but it's not enough without the feeding of truth and biblical feeding and the nurturing and the calling to make the difference between an enthusiastic, passionate, short-term ministry versus an effective, long-term ministry, being equipped and being discipled. So I think sometimes, I love to be a cheerleader when I need to be a cheerleader. I love to be a coach when I need to be a coach, but I'm not really that rah-rah kind of guy. I kind of get a bit tired of that personally. But there are rah-rah guys, and hey, that's fantastic. Yeah. I love them. But sometimes that means I may not give the answer that someone might want to hear, or I may have to say at times, that's wonderful, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Let's take a few steps back and and that's not what, the young maverick always likes to hear. But it's learning to build things for the long run. And so that means sometimes you go a little slower than you want to go in preparation along the way. And maybe I learned that because I'm a lot slower than I used to be anyway. So I've just naturally learned it.
I don't know. That sounds like wisdom to me, man.
But no, that's just really, really important. The grounding in the scriptures and in the truth. So you got something to work with.
Well, you said a minute ago that you work with Reliant now in particular, and we'll talk a little bit more details on that. Yeah. But is going into a situation, invited, setting up shop, working, and then getting out.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that as a paradigm shift. I suppose there's different mission models for different situations.
Of course.
But it seems like, in my mind, the mission idea is you go away and stay there for years and then you come back. And you have done that many times. So what's the shift about? And is that two different styles of mission work, or is this the new trend?
It's different styles of mission work, and all of those things very valid. It's just a philosophy and a style that God has, I think, clearly given us and has relayed to us in Scripture as a principle that's very important to us. I firmly believe when it comes to North American missionaries, I don't think there's ever going to be a time between now and the Lord's return that North American missionaries are no longer needed. So I don't want anyone thinking that I'm espousing that view,
right?
Because there is need.
Yeah.
And while there is need for North American missionaries, we also need to realize that actually in 2005, a big shift happened in missions. And missions of 2005 marked the time and period where North America, us, are no longer the greatest sending country of missionaries around the world, that it was the rest of the world. Missions from everywhere to everywhere, as opposed to the model we've always had in our mind that we train missionaries from America. And I have learned many places. I said that specifically, from America, which is a real faux pas. Yeah. Because I'm told by people from all around the world, don't say you're from America. Like, we're Americans as well. Right. We're South Americans. We're Central Americans.
Okay. So
you actually don't get to own that. Right. And so, noted.
All right, noted. All right.
From the United States,
gotcha.
From our part of North America.
Right.
which we don't even own that because that's
Right.
Canada and Mexico
Right.
as well. So, learning to be not quite so ethnocentric
Yeah.
or egocentric
Yeah.
in missions. But so all that to say, for us, the focus is now, instead of going somewhere and setting up long-term for years and church planning and developing, which is very good, but we really desire to, if you go to where they are at their invitation, to equip them to reach their own ethnicities or their own people group. There are just great advantages there. That's happening around the world despite ourselves, because the North American mission model has taken some real hits over the past 20 to 25 years.
Yeah.
There are not the rank and file North American missionaries to fill in where the others are retiring for many reasons. The great big mission bases around the world and some of the traditional mission giants, who are faithful and wonderful, are being disinvited in different places around the world and cannot continue. And so some of those older models are sort of falling apart, and the great missions engine has finally realized, whether it was just biblical reality and wisdom or practicality and necessity,
Right.
Perhaps we need to train the nationals and indigenous here to do it, because we can no longer sustain these efforts. By hook or crook, whether it's out of necessity or whether it's out of wisdom. The beautiful thing is so much more effort is being put into training the nationals and indigenous where they're at.
And it's
which
safe
is
to
great.
say that actually yields more results, because it seems like if you give the people the tools, and then they all know each other better, they know their country better than us, it seems like that would really work well.
Oh, it does, and it does yield far better. Now, there are times whenever someone who's an outsider of a culture can come into a culture and people listen because they're an outsider.
Right.
And so
It's important,
sometimes, and then sometimes there are cultures specifically, they will never listen because you're an outsider.
Yeah.
And then the missionary has the responsibility to become an insider,
Right.
learning the culture, putting aside their culture, learning learning to look for the redemptive analogies or the little window in that culture to be able to work within the gospel where it makes sense within their worldview and their heart, and they see it.
Yeah.
And all that happens whenever you put aside yours and you're becoming like them. So that has tremendous value, but the greatest value is, of course, the insiders within a culture. People would say, I guess some of the terminology we use a lot now, finding the person of peace within a culture.
Interesting.
Someone who is known, someone who is regarded, someone who can learn to take the gospel to much further lengths, than we can, because we can try all we want, and some people are definitively better at it than others. But we can never really shed our identity and our home culture, and no matter how hard we try. But God uses all of that, and that's very evident. Within the last 300 years of the history of missions, it's just that those within a culture are more suited to reach their culture in general.
Yeah,
Some people would argue various points, but that's certainly true, and that's an area where we hang out and live and focus now. So that's why we're there for shorter periods of time. We just got back from Costa Rica, where there we were actually a part of training some ministry workers who work in refugee settlements in areas, and Costa Rican ministers as well, of course, because of the trauma involved with refugee settlements. There are 400 to 500,000 refugees from Nicaragua in Costa Rica, and so that ministry is vitally important. Here in the U.S., we just got back 2 weeks ago from Clarkston, Georgia, where we took a team. And Clarkston, Georgia is essentially Atlanta. It's a little suburb of Atlanta. But
it's so not.
Oh, it is so not.
Yeah.
20,000 people, 20,000 population of Clarkston. Of the 20,000, 14,000 international refugees from over 50 countries.
All right, just stop there. Say that again, because that's big. And I didn't know about this until I was talking to some of our mutual friends about what's going on there.
Okay.
And it's like, what?
Clarkston, Georgia.
20,000 people.
Yeah, right off 285 going around Atlanta there. 20,000 people population, 14,000 of which are international refugees from over 50 countries. So you pull off of 285 into Tucker, into Clarkston, Georgia, and you are indeed in another world. It is as cross-cultural as anyone could ever be without a passport here in the U.S. And so we had a team working there, and that's another area. If we can encourage a church from our area that might hear this and they're interested in international missions and outreach and refugee work, but don't want to get a passport or not comfortable taking a team, we can hook you up, so to speak, and do some training and get you there for some mind-bending experiences and stretching experiences in missions and helping churches there with all of these cultures. We primarily served among refugees from former Burma, which is Myanmar and from Sudan and from the Congo and many of, but that was primarily the groups that we were serving and working with there. So we just got back from there. And now we're preparing to go to this country in Central America. We're going to work for 1 month there. We're going to pull out of there. And we thought we were on our way to Ukraine 2 weeks after that. Just found out a couple of days ago that due to just dynamics and circumstances, that's not a possibility right now. So that gets put on the back burner. Then we thought we were headed to Bogota, Colombia, and we found out that's now on the back burner as well. But other places are moving back in. And so we will be back in Costa Rica a couple of times at the end of this year. And then in January, end of January, then we will be able, I think, at that time, prayerfully, to go back into India to serve with several projects that are there, and Nepal. Then we'll be re-gearing at that point in time to see.
Next, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Reliance specifically now.
Okay.
In our first interview that never saw the light of day, we were talking a lot about this, and one of the things that you said that struck me was that when you went in for training, they were treating you as if you were the new kid off the street. And you're like, okay, we need to teach you about how missions work. And and you and Jamie just held your tongue.
No. That was a very valuable experience. That's right. Whenever we went to serve with Reliant, when you serve with any mission organization, then they have their training and their orientations, which are very, very important. Their candidate processes and all, where your sending church sends you to the organization and you learn all about it and their standards and how it works, and preparing for support raising and going back into the support world, back into faith missions, has been an interesting challenge. But we really have enjoyed that and desired that. But we were there. There were 22 other candidates in our training class, and so they sort of looked at us. For some reason, we stood out just a little bit. Because everyone there really was just out of college. And so they were 21, 22, 23, or very young couples, a lot of singles and some young couples. I think the oldest may have been about 30, except for us. And we're a little past that. Mm-hmm. And so, they're looking at each other on the computer screen or in a room. They're all kind of give us the side eye, like, what are you doing here? And so, we went in through all the training with them. They thought at first we were the directors of Reliant, and we were there just to scope them out. And we're like, no, we're one of you. We're rookies with you. It's just that we happen to be rookies with 30 years experience.
Right.
And it was fantastic training, very humbling, because usually we're on the other side of this, where we're providing the training and prepping those for ministry, not on the end of being trained. And so they didn't quite know what to do with us and where we fit, but we said, no, we're not going to sidestep any of this. We want to go in fully just as new candidates, to do this. And so that was interesting. Yeah. But it was humbling and a lot of fun. God used that time.
So tell us about what was your journey towards Reliant? You kind of filled us in on the timeline here. You were on staff at Sanders for a while, overseeing missions. You had done a lot of stuff in the field. What drew you to Reliant?
Well, what drew us to Reliant really was they were willing to take us where we were to use us in the way of the special calling we felt the Lord had on our lives, which was a little bit different than working with, perhaps the best thing to do is to use an example. Like we love South America Mission. That's one of the many agencies that we've worked with much over the years, and there are countless others. Yeah. But as we were looking at, now we're back into the supported faith missions gig of things, and so we needed a missions agency. Okay. A missions agency require for a sending church to send to them, and then you serve with that agency. South America Mission. Obviously, with South America Mission, your focus is South America. So whenever we ask, we say we're very interested in serving in many cultures worldwide. We essentially want to be resources and trainers, and they were very excited about that. And I asked, so what are the possibilities of serving? This is a rhetorical question, as it turns out. Right. Can we serve with South America Mission? And then if we do that, then can we be in India, Nepal, Costa Rica, Ukraine, wherever? And they were like, probably not. Maybe. Yeah. But, well, no, because we have, our focus is South America, of course. Yeah. And Reliant really was Reliant and Here's Life were willing to accommodate. They liked the idea of being able to offer resources to other mission organizations and cross-cultural church plants and situations. They really embrace the idea of being able to offer a resource, in this case, Jamie and I, to loan us out to whatever project and whatever place would like teaching or a boost or equipping. And so they were very excited about that. And not many really were. Yeah. And both Here's Life and Reliant really were behind the idea of letting us be resources and have a real kingdom mindset of thinking, which is such an important word. And by kingdom, I don't mean the theologically gnarly things that people want to discuss or disagree about kingdom. We just mean the ultimate kingdom when Christ returns. There you go. In the meantime, we're to live like he matters. Okay, that to me, that's kingdom living. Mm-hmm. And that means living beyond our boundary lines of our church or our missions organization, being faithful to our missions organization and faithful in the local church, but having the mindset that it's not about us. Yeah. It's about preparing others for ministry and not about self-preservation and keeping an organization alive or funded or whatever. Right. And you got to do those things. Yeah. But a kingdom mindset, and they were all about that. So we said, okay, if that's the deal, we're in if you would have us.
Sounds like a perfect fit.
Yeah, sure. So it's a great fit for that.
So it says here, just in case people can't read this, equipping the local church worldwide through training, education, and consulting. That's a pretty vast. That's a very open canvas. Mm-hmm, obviously, right. That's a blank canvas, and maybe a little too filled with vagaries for some folks. But Reliant and Here's Life. They do approve our work schedule. They approve our projects. We are accountable, and that's the reason we did this to start with.
we want to be accountable to mission organizations and to those that would approve what we do and where we do it, because there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors, and being accountable is very important. We had been in missions and ministry for a long time, and there were a number of people who actually said, maybe you should just start your own mission organization. Just do that. Just do that. Why would you go and be a part of another organization saying well-intended and very sweet, encouraging things such as, well, you've been around a while and you might know what you're doing, so don't work for someone else. Just do your own thing. And our response was no, 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 nay, 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 negative, negative. No. Because we could have, and anyone, it's not too hard to start your own nonprofit, your own 501c3 or whatever designation. Have done that before for other agencies and people, and that's fine. But we are not interested at this point in our lives and in our ministry of keeping an organization alive, serving the organization. You got to keep it legal. You got to keep it funded. You got to keep all those things. It would have taken 50% of our time and 50% of our resources just to run an organization. And that's just not where our heart was, not where our heart is. And so we wanted to be a part of things for accountability and to help there.
But you want to dive in and get your hands dirty.
We want to dive in and we want to get into it and not be involved in the administration of an organization.
Fantastic. All right, so reliant.org is where people can go to get some more information.
Right.
Let's shift and kind of land the plane here talking about support, because you mentioned you're back in that headspace, and I want the viewers of this to know what that looks like on the ground, and then how we can support you guys.
Well, that's a really neat question. That was one of the biggest changes. We had been, Church of Sandhurst is so gracious to us. That's really the only time of our past 30 years, the past 12 years with Church of Sandhurst, where they're so gracious, but where you receive a salary and where you have insurance and these kinds of things, and which was just really mind-numbing to us. You mean they're going to pay us like every month after being on faith support for so many years, and we're going to have insurance? So, I mean, like we could go like to the hospital and give them this little card and they'll
actually treat
you. So that was, kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And whenever I told Jamie that we talked about it, so I think it's time for us to step back into faith-supported mission, which is what this is. And I just said, do you see any red flags? I said, other than the fact of, well, we don't have salary and we won't have this and we won't other than that, do you see any red flags? But she's a gamer. She's like, no, absolutely not. It's time. She even said we're on our daily walk a couple of days after that, and we're looking at taking the step of faith. And she looked over at me, and some of the best words I've ever heard in my life from her of confirmation, she says, taking this step, I feel like we're us again. And I'm like, okay, all right, slay me now. Man. But faith support looks like this. We're with this mission organization. This mission organization requires that you have a sending church, and it requires that this sending church supports you prayerfully, financially, for a portion of your support.
Okay.
And then the rest of our support is made up from other churches who know us and believe in our calling, and they want to be a part of it.
Okay.
It's made up of friends who know us, who want to be a part.
Personal support, right?
Personal support, friends and family members or businesses or others who want to be a part of this. And this in our case is, are you about helping to meet the needs of the world through trauma healing in a time such as this? And or are you about equipping the indigenous, to do the work themselves worldwide? And we also do microfinance ministry. So that's maybe another topic, but where workers are taught to have a small business, to be self-sufficient, Christian workers, so pastors and missionaries worldwide cannot be relying on support from the West, us, but can be self-sufficient. Yeah. So if someone's excited about any of those things, then we pray to develop a support team where they support us monthly or yearly or a one-time gift to be able to help make it work for us.
Yeah.
We're currently at about, 88% supported.
Fantastic.
Which is a blessing.
But it's not 100%.
It's not 100%, and normally Reliant won't release you for ministry until you're at 100%.
Really? Okay. I like these guys.
Yeah, they won't.
Yeah.
But they did. They said we think that you have enough experience and you're familiar with how all of this works. We're going to release you, but we still are going to require you to be at 100%.
Yeah.
Within a reasonable amount of time. And so we're working on that. We're 88% supported. However, we travel a lot. Our travel expenses and our living expenses are high. When you go from culture to culture, country to country, you have to get there,
Yeah.
you have to set up, you have to be able to live there, and then come back. And we're sort of gone for a month to 6 weeks or so, and then we're here for about a month, working on things, doing Zoom.
Prepping for the next.
Prepping for the next, doing Zoom teachings
Yeah.
all over the world. And then we take off again. So our own church at Sandhurst, some other churches, businesses, individuals, family members who know us are all part of our support team. They're kind of holding up our arms.
Yep.
They're sort of our Aaron and her, as we are Aaron and hers together. But that's how it works in the support missions world. So, and we would encourage people who might be listening or watching this, get involved somewhere, tithe to your church. Don't cut your church short. Be faithful in your tithe. But I would challenge them, if they'd love to support us, we would love for that to happen. But kingdom thinking says support somebody somewhere, support a mission somewhere, support a work around the world, support a work to people who don't look like you do or think like we do. There are countless opportunities. Contact Jamie and I, and we would love to have you in that sense, not support us, but we could tell you of 100 opportunities where you can be faithful with what the Lord's given you. In Perspectives, which is a missions course that we're very excited about being a part of, we teach about having a wartime mentality. And whenever people in this country had a wartime mentality back in the difficult wars, World War I, World War II, everyone had to pitch in together, and they had to ration things, and they had to make sacrifices for the overall effort. And a wartime mentality in missions would be, we know what it takes for us to live, and we need to be faithful to that. We need to feed our children. We need to drive a car. We need to go to work. But maybe there's some other expenses we could give up on and then decide we're going to give that on purpose to the cause of missions in and around the world. So that's living with the wartime mentality now. Understand that we are part of a battle. We're part of a calling. And we can find creative ways to support and sacrifice ourselves to be able to support the work that needs to be done. Really is what the church is called to do. But anyway, that's how it works.
That's beautiful, man. And we're going to put information along with this video for how people can get up with you guys and links to Reliant and to Here's Life and just some information about what you guys are doing. And I'll even put a link to Jamie's Faces of Florence interview because it's fantastic. And just if people miss that, I would love
hers is much better than mine.
Well, we need you both. We need both Stuckeys represented here. So, but I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you just being so forthright with this. We could talk all day about this, but let's wrap it up. And on the tail end here, make your best pitch for why people need to invest in you guys from the perspective of who you're reaching. Like, tell me about somebody that maybe you met in Clarkston that you were like, this is why I do this.
Okay, well, in Clarkston in particular, there was a young man, and and I normally wouldn't want to divulge a name. There are many Abduls in Clarkston.
Okay.
But he from Ethiopia, and that's his name, and he is he's Muslim.
Okay.
But man, this guy's heart is wide open to the teaching of Scripture. And he is hungry, and he is asking for it. And he is there putting himself in front of teaching through Great Frontier Missions, which is the mission organization really working among the refugees there, and missionaries whom we know and support out of this area, Timmy and Kenyon Powers, who were there. Well, this young man, Abdul, he's very close to accepting Christ. He's very close to just hugging the truth of the gospel. And there are many that look to him, and he absolutely, his desire is to return to his homeland. That's his desire. While many are running from the fire in their homeland, here in refugee situations, his goal is to get back. And so there is a young man of peace that will be listened to among his people of his culture and of his country. And if he goes back in prepared with the gospel, I'm just going to venture a guess that he can do a lot more than Kevin or Greg in his homeland than we can. And we're told to go to the ends of the earth. And we do that, and we would love to have your support to do it. But we also need to realize the ends of the earth are coming to us. And we can equip them to go out, and we can equip people in their own context or their own country to go out, and that's what we do. So if that excites you, then we would love to have you jump in with us for those kinds of reasons.
Start that dominoes falling.
Yep, there you go.
That's amazing. Well, Greg Stuckey, thank you so much for being a part of the Florence community, and thank you for not being a part of the Florence community and going out to the world as well, and thank you for being a part of Faces of Florence today.
Oh, we appreciate you guys.